This information is not intended as legal, medical, or nutritional advice and is for informational purposes only. Vaccine Choice Canada does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements, views, and opinions presented by its guests.
Fabulous to have you all. Thanks for joining us again this evening, and a special welcome to those joining us for the first time. One of the benefits of membership with Vaccine Choice Canada is the opportunity to spend time with some amazing leaders in the field of science and research, medicine, and truth, and this evening is no exception. Patrick Wood is our guest. He is a man with many talents. He's the executive director and founder of Citizens for Free Speech, an incredibly important initiative at this time of increasing global censorship. Patrick is also a leading and critical expert on Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, and Technocracy. He is a prolific writer, including such titles as Technocracy Rising, The Trojan Horse of Global Transformation, Technocracy, The Hard Road to World Order, and Globalization and the Crucible of Global Banking. An economist by education, a financial analyst and writer by profession, and an American constitutionalist by choice, Patrick has deep insights into the modern attacks on our sovereignty, property rights, and personal freedom. Welcome, Patrick, and thank you for joining us this evening. Nice to have you. Thanks.
Okay, that's great. I just said that this is one step away from meeting in person, and it would be wonderful if we could ever do that. But otherwise, as they say, hugs, not shots. So,
well, I look forward to spending time with you in Phoenix this winter. So we'll make a plan of that. So in our conversation that you and I had earlier today, you said something that was interesting. You said to me, they have declared war on us. And so I'm curious, when did you recognize that we're at war?
July 30, 2020. That was the day that the World Health Organization declared a pandemic. And everything went downhill from then. That was the day specifically that they declared the pandemic. And as I looked around the global internet just to see who was saying what to who and what the chatter was, if that makes sense, I saw the same people that were formerly active with the global warming alarmist crowd, same crowd of people, same universities, same crackpot computer models, spitting out buffalo chips because that's all they put in the front end. And so what the global warming crowd could not achieve, even though they tried to panic the world repeatedly, the last try was poor little Greta Thunberg, a victim in my opinion, but this poor girl was hopping up and down the United Nations screaming your house is going to burn down, or is burning down. Well, they ran out of credibility on the global warming issue. They ran out of the ability to create more fear. And so, just my thought at the time was they've jumped to a parallel track. And then all of a sudden they adopted the COVID narrative and they started running with it. And anyway, that was my realization that big trouble was brewing. I don't think anybody really knew how far it was going to go at that point. But I even wrote a paper, I think it was in early February, stating that Technocracy's coup d'etat is underway.
So you've been following Technocracy for a while and writing about it.
Years and years.
What is it that you see and what concerns you about that growth of Technocracy?
Well, probably the most dangerous thing, if I could sum it up in a kind of an understandable way, is that Technocracy and transhumanism, both of them are based on what I think is a very evil religion called scientism. And scientism, and I'll have to explain why. I don't want to shock anybody with this, but scientism was created as a philosophy way back in the early 1800s, but it gained a lot of whatever coinage in the early 1900s, and it's been growing ever since. It just hasn't been recognized very well. But scientism, the philosophical side of it, says that scientists are superior to all other men, that they have the ability to predict like prophets. And the original philosopher that started all this said what we need to have is a priesthood of scientists and engineers that will administer the truth of science to the masses. And so what scientism proposes is there's no source of truth outside of science. That means forget logic, forget ethics, forget philosophy, forget religion, especially biblical religion, Bible-based truth. All of those other sources of truth are completely discarded. If it can't be proven by science, they won't have anything to do with it. The problem with what they call science is it's not science that you and I might understand.
Right.
Okay, so it's pseudoscience, truly. And there's plenty of evidence now I think on the table that once it's seen, can't be unseen, but you see it and you understand that this pseudoscience that they're claiming is science, that like Anthony Fauci, follow the science, he says. This ain't your grandma's science that he's talking about. He's got a whole different proposition and a whole different worldview that somehow his science is correct and everybody else is wrong and everybody else is excluded. This business of scientism is always exclusionary too. They will not receive criticism from anybody outside their own clique. That's what makes it so dangerous. It also can't be fought by good science. And I was just down in Tucson this last weekend. I was fortunate to speak at the Doctors for Disaster Preparedness Convention. It was the 39th annual convention that they had down in Tucson. And I spoke there and I talked to these people. And there were a bunch of scientists there, preeminent people, professors in universities. I mean, it was a blast talking with these guys and stuff, but they were really busy. They came to scientifically debunk all the stuff that's going on that they're telling us is a disaster and, whatever Anthony Fauci's science is and so on. They got great science behind them. Some of them were primary researchers, I might add. And I brought up in my speech on Saturday night, it was at the banquet, the evening meal that they had. I brought up that you can't fight a religion with some type of evidence, like, correct evidence, like the scientific truth of a matter. It's a religion. You can't fight one with the other. And that's one reason we've never had success fighting the global warming crowd. And that's why we're not able to fight this pseudoscience crowd, because they are not moved by evidence. It goes in one ear, picks up speed, and goes out the other ear. Right? That's what we're facing right now. This is a religion that they brought to the table. And I have to say, if somebody's saying scientism, there were a bunch of books written by scholars in the last century about scientism. C.S. Lewis was one. He wrote several books and papers on scientism, how dangerous it was. F.A. Hayek also wrote a book on scientism. And there are many others that probably names you might recognize that have addressed scientism in the past. I would encourage anybody to go and find some of those works or some of those papers from, say, 1950, 1960, something like that, and read up on them and find out what they say. Because this is exactly what's at play right now in the world. And I wish it could be fought with empirical evidence, but it just doesn't work. It's a religion. So we have to, if we're going to battle it, we have to figure out how can you battle a religion short of having just an outright religious war. But I will point out that wars in history of most every one of them have been tied to some type of a religious aberration.
Right.
In the
I
Old
think what's-
Testament, it was the idol worshippers of one god or another want to fight, some other group that was worshiping another god or another idol. And they had some ferocious wars over those things.
I think what's interesting here, though, Patrick, is I would suspect that they don't recognize that it's a religion. They think that they're holders of science.
Yes.
And so if you were to bring to their attention that they're practicing scientism, that they're participating in a religion, they would probably argue against that you don't know what you're talking about.
They
I mean,
have
that's
argued against
challenging.
that. Yes, they have. They have argued against that. And I have actually talked to people who have argued against that. And the evidence of their misunderstanding, if it's not just totally disingenuous, back in the 1970s, when we were writing about the Trilateral Commission, which is kind of the fountainhead of modern globalization, one of their key players who had members in the Trilateral Commission was the Aspen Institute. It was originally called the Aspen Institute for Humanistic Studies, and they finally changed their name just to the Aspen Institute. Well, Aspen was a think tank that studied humanism. It was determined by our Supreme Court that humanism was a religion, period. It was, it's on the books. It's not a question. Nothing can really be argued about that. It was declared to be a religion. Science, and I'll say the thing about humanism that kind of the main thought of it is, it's like, well, look what man can do, right? Look what man can do for himself, excluding God, of course. And it's not what God can do for us, it's what man can do for man. And that was the basis of that religion. And that's why the Supreme Court claimed that it was a religion. They had all the markers of it, and they did. So now you have scientism, which is really it wasn't an offshoot, but it's an aberration of the same type of thinking. Look what we scientists can do. It's not just what we humans can do. Look what we scientists can do. Same thought, it's just focused on science and these scientists who say that they have the exclusive lock on truth in the world. It's a religion.
What is their agenda? I mean, as you look at this, what do they want to accomplish? What's their goal?
If you look at the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab is the head. You'll see what he calls the Great Reset. A lot of talk been on that. You'll hear the phrase, build back better. Your own PM used that phrase multiple times.
Yes.
We're going to build back better. If you look more closely at the World Economic Forum, you'll find that they're not only looking to reform or reset the economic system, which is into technocracy, towards the technocratic state. They're also looking to change humanity, to use technology to hijack, I use the word hijack, the evolutionary process, so that they can change genetic structures of organisms, including man, okay, to make for a new world. And I tied the two together in my talk at Doctors for Disaster Preparedness like this. I said, technocracy is to society and the structure of society as transhumanism is to the people who live there in a technocracy, okay? You have the structure, the container, and then you have the people who live there. It's kind of like if you went into space and you had a spaceship, the spaceship would, I suppose, represent technocracy. This is just using a parallel. But when you went outside, you'd have to wear a spacesuit. You'd have to, or you'd have to learn how to breathe in outer space without oxygen or something. But this is what we see springing out of the World Economic Forum. That they're not only looking at resetting the economic system, they're looking at resetting humanity itself. And that's what genetic engineering is all about. That's why I believe with this vaccine, these mRNA vaccines are all about. It's about changing, it's beginning to change. This is just the forefront of it. It's not the end of it. It's not the, step 10. This is just the leading edge of taking over the human genome. And I'll tell you, it sounds crazy. I know it sounds crazy to you if you've never considered that thought before, but the documents are in, and it's very clear what they're trying to do. I'll show you some other evidence, some slides and stuff later.
So do you believe that what's behind this is greed? Is it that they don't like humans the way we are? Is it arrogance?
Yep.
What is it, or all of the above?
Well, it probably is to some extent all of the above, but I will say, going back to the 1970s when the Trilateral Commission was formed, you remember that David Rockefeller and Zbigniew Brzezinski were the co-founders of the Trilateral Commission. Kind of the beauty and the beast. Rockefeller had the money, Brzezinski had the brains. Brilliant guy, for sure. And Rockefeller picked up Brzezinski as his partner in or co-founder in the Trilateral Commission, because Brzezinski brought a new idea to the table, namely technocracy. That what he was writing about when he wrote his book in 1970 was called Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technotronic Era. It's a heady book. It's on the internet, scanned. You can go out and find it and download it if you want to read it. But he suggested that where we're headed in the world was towards this technotronic era that would surpass Marxism, communism, and all the other isms, socialism, and it would become essentially a scientific dictatorship in the end. That's also what Aldous Huxley predicted, what Julian Huxley predicted, what
Orwell.
All the other dystopian books and stuff we're looking towards. But this was their game plan from day one at the Trilateral Commission. They said all over their literature back then that they were going to create a new international economic order incessantly, every single publication. That became their tagline, actually, like their subtitle, New International Economic Order. We did not understand back then. I say we, Professor Anthony Sutton and myself, we did not understand what the word new meant. And I don't say that as a joke. We really didn't. We thought new just meant kind of a restructuring of the current order of things, right? Like gaming the slot machine, sort of, so that it would always pay off for them and never pay off for us. That was true up to a point because they did that. But what Rockefeller was looking at back then was a way to take over the resources of the world directly. Rather than having to go through the money route to get there, I think they readily foresaw that the end of money was at hand. We see it today, but it was just a matter of time. It was mathematically certain at some point the fractional reserve system was going to come to an end. And what would they do after that? And the only hope that they had was to use their influence then to sequester or to grab as many resources as they could of the world and place them into a global common trust, thereby denying you and I the right to private property, which was always on the chopping block, private property, that is. And this was essentially, it was a resource grab. They figured that if money failed, it wouldn't matter to them, because if they owned all the resources and there were still people in the world that wanted them, it would not matter what type of a financial system would come out of that chaos. They would be the top dog because they owned the real estate. They owned the resources, the timber, the mines, the agriculture, everything in between. All wealth in the world always has come from the ground, always. You own the ground, you own everything in society, basically. It's like feudalism back in the Dark Ages, when a few, overlords owned everything, and the paupers had to just eke out a living. And if the land baron liked you, he'd let you stay. If he didn't, you might find yourself fertilizing the pigs. This was a pretty simple plan if you think about it originally, like as a resource grab. But if you think about global warming for a minute, and then you think about what we're talking about here about the pandemic, the United Nations, which is very close, or tightly integrated with the World Economic Forum, the United Nations and the WEF are only and ever only proposing one single solution to whatever it is that ails us, only one solution. That is sustainable development. That's always the answer. It doesn't matter what the problem is, it's sustainable development is the answer. That's what we need. And this ought to be a red flag right there, that, you know, anytime a huckster comes along and tries to stimulate you with fear, you know, like the car salesman said, well, you know, the sale ends tonight at midnight. And you know, this $2,500 discount won't be available at 12:01. You better hurry up and nail it. Anytime somebody puts fear on you like that you need to move and act, you need to look and say, what's their game? What kind of game are they playing? What are they huckstering me towards and into? Well, for the last 20 years, maybe actually 30 years going back, the only thing that's ever offered as a solution to the problems of the world, whatever they might be, is sustainable development, period. There's never a plan B, never a plan C. There's no talk about capitalism and free market economics and how to resuscitate, clean up some of those areas. Never. It's always sustainable development. That's the answer. And that's what they're pushing today. We say, well, why sustainable development? Well, by definition, sustainable development is a resource-based economic system. They want to control all the resources, and they want to control everything that you consume as a consumer. Both ends of the scale, the production and the consumption. They want to control and micromanage everything in the world. This is really insane in a way, but you know, you look at the global nature of global warming, you look at the global nature of the pandemic, and you say, yeah, it has to be somebody operating at the global level here. Otherwise, it would just be a Canadian faux pas or a US faux pas or some other, you know, India, whatever. We've all had our problems over the decades, you know, that people could look at, oh, look what they did. They really screwed up. This is a global thing. That means it has global handlers. You say, well, what's the objective? Every year, you see the United Nations out talking to all the nations of the world to set aside heritage zones, for instance. Heritage zones are large swaths of land in countries that shouldn't really afford to give it away, but they say, look, we'll come in and we'll manage this tract of land for you. You set it aside as a government. We'll make it a heritage zone. Don't let anybody in it. You have to stop development on that property, and we will help you manage that property for the sake of it being sustainable. So many countries have been literally raided. I'd use the word raped, but you get my point. They've been raided for their prime real estate and prime resources. It's been taken off the market. The United States now, U.S. government owns over 30% of the landmass of the United States.
Wow.
We say, what? It's not allowed in our Constitution that they own anything outside of Washington, D.C. and a few ports and military bases. They've been spending taxpayer money to accumulate real estate in America by setting aside these environmental zones and national parks and, you know, BLM tracts and you name it. And now, you know, it's kind of like a snake eating its tail, right? It's like the taxpayers are paying the money to buy our own real estate right out from under us. How does that work? But it's a resource grab, I can tell you. That's really kind of at the bottom of the whole thing. That doesn't tell us why we're having vaccines right now, but those are the people that have been driving the narrative since the early 1970s, let me put it that way. And we see the health stuff come in a big way starting about 1992. And I'll show you some quotes on that will make that point. So it's about control.
Show those slides, Patrick?
Sure. It's about control, bottom line. These people want to control and micromanage the world. And some of you, I'm sure, have seen the World Economic Forum video. It's a short little promo video they did for themselves. It starts out and it says, you will own nothing and you will be happy. And it shows a nice looking young man smiling and, you know, life is great for him. How can you own nothing and be happy? I mean, are you guys ready to give up everything and be happy?
Well,
I call that being homeless.
well, and they don't live by that philosophy. They want to own everything, as you say.
I know. So,
And
you know, and I asked, you know,
who are these people? Do we even know who they are?
I say it again.
Who is they? Who are these people that are initiating?
Look at the World Economic Forum right now. I don't think you need to look any further than who they are at the top and who they are, their membership, who are supporting them, et cetera. You'll find every big tech company, you'll find all the multinational corporations now are complicit with these people. I'll make the observation too, back in the 70s, these people were in hiding. They didn't want anybody to know what they were doing. We got censored like crazy back then because we were blowing the whistle on them. They said, you know, shut up, shut up. And we were censored into oblivion to keep it quiet. Even David Rockefeller himself said in the 90s that he owed a great debt of gratitude to the media that were allowed to go to the Trial Commission meetings, but didn't say anything about what was going on there. And they were under a gag order at the time to be allowed to come. So they hid out. Now, all of a sudden, in the last, in a big way, and really just in the last couple of years, the World Economic Forum is out on kind of on the street, so to speak, blowing their trumpets about themselves. They want everybody to know who they are all of a sudden. Now, 5 years ago, if you criticized the World Economic Forum, you were a conspiracy theorist. You were radical. You were nuts. You had a tinfoil hat. Why are you writing about these people? They're nothing. It's just a discussion group. Now we see them completely coming out of the closet, so to speak, blowing their horn and putting out volumes of videos and volumes of speeches and volumes of literature and you name it. And it's all about the Great Reset. These are the people right now that are driving this. You could look at it locally. You could look at the Green New Deal. That's another synonym. You could look at the term natural capitalism, which it isn't really capitalism, but that's one of the things that's used. A green economy is another synonym. Smart growth is another word that's used for sustainable development. But right now it's still about control. It's about controlling everything everywhere and owning everything. And you and I will own nothing. That's what they want. I mean, they've come right out and said it. They couldn't be any more blatant about it. You will own nothing and you'll be happy.
Right.
Now, that's a two-pronged prediction. You will own nothing first. That is for sure. The fact that they would say you'll be happy is pretty.
They've got some happy pills coming. I think that Orwell wrote about that in 1984, right?
Well, indeed. And back in Brave New World, in that book, you might remember that when anybody felt a little bit odd or down or sad or whatever, they always took a pill, and that pill was called Soma, S-O-M-A. We have a drug today called Soma. You probably all know what it is. It's a happy pill. If you get down, you take your Soma and just forget about being unhappy. Just be happy, take more pills. Let me see if I can share a screen here. I'm kind of keeping my eye on the clock here too.
Yeah, we want to get to some questions too. There we go. Yes.
You should see my PowerPoint now, right?
Yes.
Okay. This is the slides from the presentation I gave in Tucson to the Doctors for Disaster Preparedness group. And yeah, it's a revolution. There's a lot of similarities with the French Revolution, by the way. I won't go into it, but it's there. And I talked about scientism being in between technocracy and transhumanism. Gave a quick definition of what technocracy is. If you want to, I know you're recording this, so you'll have the recording available for people. It's the science of social engineering. This is from their own literature in 1938. The science of social engineering, the scientific operation of the entire social mechanism to produce and distribute goods and services to the entire population. You can see the similarity to sustainable development today. It's a resource-based economic system. For the first time in human history, it'll be done as a scientific, technical, and engineering problem. That's what they believed. But they went on in that same magazine, they went on to say there will be no place for politics, politicians, finance or financiers, rackets or racketeers. Technocracy will distribute by means of a certificate of distribution available to every citizen from birth to death. And people scratch their head on this. What do you mean there'd be no place for politics, politicians, etc.? Well, these people were so sure. This started at Columbia University. These weren't just a bunch of wingnuts. They believed that their science was so superb that politics would be outmoded. They figured, what do you need politicians for? We're, just do what we say, and that's the right thing because science said. I'll tell you, this is hard stuff, but that's what they believe, and that's what they wrote. So I pointed out that technocracy is the only alternative economic system in the history of the world, and it truly is. Nobody else has ever sat down to try and create something from scratch. They did it. And then we switched over to transhumanism just to kind of lay the groundwork for that it promotes, and this is from the founder of transhumanism, Max Moore. He actually lives in Arizona here in Scottsdale, believe it or not. But he wrote in, I think, 1996 or so, transhumanism promotes an interdisciplinary approach to understanding and evaluating the opportunities for enhancing the human condition and the human organism, opened up by the advancement of technology. Attention is given to both present technologies, catch this, like genetic engineering, really, and information technology, that's computers, and anticipated future ones such as molecular nanotechnology and artificial intelligence. That he wrote that in the 90s, mid-90s. So, okay, let's look further. Here's what I mean by convergence and NBIC. If you've never seen this, you just search the internet for NBIC. You'll find all kinds of stuff. We'll explain it to you, but it's 4 disciplines rolled into one. And universities, about year 2000, universities started creating another department, another science department within their colleges, where they combined people from the nanotechnology world, which is N, the biotechnology world, which is genes, the information technology world, which is computers and bits, and then cognitive technologies or cognitive science, which concerns your brain. So people from all of these 4 disciplines were put in a room together, dream something up, guys. You're all on the same page now. You've got computer language, AI's coming along, all this stuff is what's suitable to take over the human race. But some people call this like a scientific convergence as well. They use taxpayer money essentially across the whole planet to set these departments up, and off they went to the races. They got grants, they got big time money to explore how they can do this kind of stuff. This is one reason that CRISPR was created. That's the genetic engineering tool. So transhumanism, according to the World Economic Forum, I mentioned they're big in it. They wrote on their website, the central premise of transhumanism is that biological evolution will eventually be overtaken by advances in genetic, wearable, and implantable technologies that artificially expedite the evolutionary process. Can you see the takeover here?
Yes.
Okay, they're looking to take over the human condition. Now, they also said, going a little in the same web page, to date, areas to improve on include natural aging, including for diehards, the cessation of involuntary death, that means immortality, as well as physical, intellectual, and psychological capacity. Some distinguished scientists, such as Hans Moravec and Ray Kurzweil, he works at Google, by the way, he's the head of engineering at Google, look out for him, even advocate a post-human condition. That is the end of humanity's reliance on our congenital bodies by transforming our frail version 1.0 human bodies into their far more durable and capable version 2.0 counterparts. This comes right from the World Economic Forum. It's like, what? Why didn't they ever tell us this? Well, they didn't, is the point. But it's right out there in black and white. We don't need to speculate about it. These people are are diehard transhumanists and they're diehard technocrats as well at the same time. And both of those are based on scientism. And I already kind of explained what that was. You can go back and get some of C.S. Lewis's work from the 40s and 50s and read some of that. The Magician's Twin was one of those books. The Space Trilogy addressed scientism. Where it started was back in the early 1800s with a French philosopher by the name of Henri de Saint-Simon. And around 1816, he had a spat of writing when part of that said, "A scientist, my dear friends," he was anti-religion, by the way. He was railing against religion of the day. He said, "A scientist, my dear friends, is a man who foresees it is because science provides the means to predict that it is useful and the scientists are superior to all other men." That's just an incredible statement. This is the bad way to get out of bed in the morning, in my opinion. That you're superior to everyone else. You know, you can look at somebody like Anthony Fauci and you can just see this. It just drips. It drips from him. A man who foresees, that's a prophet, right? I can see the future. I can predict what's going to happen, like Neil Ferguson did at, the first computer model that said 1.2 million Americans were going to die and 500,000 Brits. He was just full of hot air, but he made the thing. I can predict the future. I'll tell you what's going to happen. My computer model says so. So there's all kinds of markers of scientism, and you can, take a look at these later. I'll note down towards the bottom that it does believe there is no God. It's very atheistic in its view. They believe it is predictive, able to tell the future. And here's the two important things. Number one, they reject any inquiry that does not agree. Anybody that doesn't agree with them, they just flat out reject it. Secondly, it demands acceptance by non-scientists. That's the masses. That's the ignorant masses they talk about. So there is no option for the little guy. When an Anthony Fauci or your director of health or whoever stands up and says, "This is the way it is, folks," and you say, "I'd like to see some proof of that," they say, "Shut up and do what we say, or else we're going to do X, Y, and Z to you." And you don't have a choice. There's no discussion. It demands acceptance by non-scientists, period. So the practitioners of scientism became, and St. Simon and his primary disciple, Auguste Comte, called for a priesthood, literally a priesthood of science and engineers to administer science on society. And it very much became a religion that worshiped science and the scientific method exclusive of all other competing religions. So, here's the main guy in our country right now, kind of the easy one to pick on, Anthony Fauci. And here's the text of his 60 Minutes interview that he had 3 or 4 weeks ago. He said, it's just do the first paragraph there. He said, "It's very dangerous, Chuck, because a lot of what you're seeing as attacks on me, quite frankly, are attacks on science." This is, I don't think he probably gets up in the morning and puts on his prophet cloak or anything. But what he's saying here is, don't shoot the messenger of my God. Science is the God. You need to follow the science. I'm just telling you what the God says. That's all. So you're going to attack me. It's not what I'm saying. I'm not responsible for what I'm saying. It's the God of science that has told me to do this. And he believes that. It's a religious proposition. He says it again at the bottom, if you're trying to get at me as a public health official and scientist, you're really attacking not only Dr. Anthony Fauci, you're attacking science. He said it twice in the same breath. It's like, whoa. So Fox News, somewhere along the way, created this little picture of him. I thought it was kind of cute. They had another idea why they printed this, I think. But, the patron saint of Wuhan, Lord Fauci is about right, though. He's the priest, the high priest in America, at least, of this God of science. So my wrap up on that was, it's a fatal error to equate scientism with science. True science explores the natural world by using time-tested scientific method of repeated experimentation and validation. I'm sure you all appreciate that. By comparison, scientism was a speculative metaphysical worldview about the nature and reality of the universe and man's relation to it. It's not science, it's pseudoscience. It's cracked as well, crackpot stuff. Lastly, there's a book written in 1994 called The Earth Brokers. You might be able to find a copy somewhere in a used bookstore or something, but these two people, authors, were principal figures in the Rio de Janeiro conference, the first Earth Summit that produced Agenda 21. That was the birthplace of sustainable development as a doctrine. Agenda 21 was the agenda for the 21st century. And these two guys were there. They were high-level participants in all the discussions that went on, and they came away very disillusioned with what they saw. And so disillusioned, they wrote a book in 1994 called The Earth Brokers. And they were still environmentalists, I have to say. They were not, any conservative or, that wasn't an issue here. They were still environmentalists. They just didn't like what they saw was happening at the Rio conference. But they wrote in their book, we argue that UNCED, that's who put it on, that was the United Nations Conference on Economic Development. We argue that UNCED has boosted precisely the type of industrial development that is destructive for the environment, the planet, and its inhabitants. We see how, as a result of UNCED, the rich will get richer, the poor poorer, while more and more of the planet is destroyed in the process. And this is exactly what's happened, I have to say, since 1994. From there on, this is exactly what we've seen happen. They went on in the book to talk about the Biodiversity Convention, which ran in parallel to the Agenda 21 track. It produced a lot of literature and a lot of agreement as part of the treaty that got signed, the Biodiversity Convention. And this is what they wrote. This will blow your mind. It's on page 43. If you get a copy of the book, you can go read it for yourself. The convention explicitly equates the diversity of life, and you've heard of biodiversity, I'm sure, in Canada. It's all over the place. It equates the diversity of life, animals and plants, to the diversity of genetic codes. Just think about that for a minute. Diversity, genetic codes. Okay. By doing so, diversity becomes something modern science can manipulate. See, they're hijacking the system. Biodiversity had nothing to do with saving species. Biodiversity had to do with taking over the gene structure of the world. And these guys just flat out said it. It promotes biotechnology as being, quote, essential for the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. Incredible. That's not all he said. They wrote, I think on the next page, we argue, I went the wrong way. On the next page, 42, the main stake raised, not the minor stake, the main stake raised by the Biodiversity Convention is the issue of ownership and control over biological diversity. The major concern was protecting the pharmaceutical and emerging biotechnology industries. Isn't that a mind blower? They nailed it. They absolutely nailed it. And I don't think they probably had half a clue what they're really talking about. But that's what they were talking about. They wrote it. They just said, this isn't about saving the environment. This is about conquering the environment, taking over the environment, hijacking the genetic codes of life. We've already seen it done with animals. We've seen it done with seeds. And, now they're coming after the human population, bottom line. So that led me to make just my final proposition to him that A is to B as Y is to X is to Y. And this means, and this is a depiction, by the way, of Technocracy back in the 30s, political cartoon. They saw it. They saw what was going on. They said, you let this monster loose, it's going to wreck everything. And so I have concluded that technocracy is to societal structure and operation. That's the process of things. Technocracy is to societal structure and operation as transhumanism is to the humans who live there. That's how it all fits together in the end. That's kind of the big macro picture. humans being transformed at the same time that society is being transformed as well. And we see markers of this now everywhere we look. So am I making sense? I know I see some hands up and stuff here. Maybe that will be saved for later, but you know, what do you think, Ted? Is this hitting the mark or?
Absolutely. And why don't we take some questions here? Because I can see that they've been engaged in the conversation. So Ray, yes. And Monique.
Hi, yes, I really appreciate your books. And actually I've been following you for about 6 months now, and very good information. But what do you believe at this point, Patrick, is the best hope for a solution to this for us and out of this situation?
Number one is not to participate. They expect orderly behavior from humans. They're anticipating that everybody's going to cooperate with their plan. They don't see any resistance to it to speak of. But every time somebody says, I will not comply, it throws a small monkey wrench into their machine. There's not quite enough people doing this globally yet, but it's picking up steam, and especially in Europe, there's hundreds of thousands of people who've been in the street bashing this whole lockdown business and stuff. There needs to be a general mindset that people are just, you know, the person is just willing to opt out of participating. If they want you to play a role, whatever that role is, whatever you figure out what that role is in your community and for you or whatever, just say, I'm not going to play that role. I refuse. The problem with that is it's going to cost you. It could cost you a lot. It's costing a lot of people their jobs right now. They say, I'm not going to take the vaccine. Say, well, you're fired. Well, that's really not legal to do that in America, but they're doing it. And so there's some people that are losing their jobs. Other people are losing access to certain places they had access to for even years. They can't get there anymore. A lot of people are not traveling now because they refuse to wear face masks on airlines. Like me, I won't do it. Every time I want to go somewhere, and I would have gone on an airplane, I call the airline up and I say, I want to tell you why I'm not buying a plane ticket. Because of your stinking mask policies that have no scientific basis whatsoever. And you may not know it, but they have no scientific basis that you can produce that says this is something scientifically good for me to wear a mask. It will harm me, not help me. So anyway, that's maybe kind of a trite thing right now, but people need to stand up and just say, you know what, I'm done with this. I'm not going to play along with this anymore. If somebody tries to get me into this mode or whatever, I'm just going to dig my heels in like that stubborn old mule, and I'm not going there. No matter what they say, no matter what they do to me. Some people will have to go to jail, I'm sure. And that's what's happening in Australia right now. People are going to jail. They're getting.
I have one other question, if I can. If I can ask one more question.
Sure.
I understand in Canada, like I go to all kinds of rallies. I talk to people all the time. We need more people. Canadians are too frickin' docile. They're too compliant. But why do you think, like I haven't seen massive demonstrations in the States like I have in Europe from what I hear. Why do you think that is, or am I just missing something?
Americans are a lot like Canadians. I hate to say it, but you know, we got a lot of just sit on your butt and watch TV and, you know, just don't worry, you know, trust our leaders. The thing is, people get personally involved when it's their wallet. You know, when somebody's reaching into their pocket finally, they say, wait a minute, I didn't bargain for that. Say, well, yes, you did, because you never did anything, you know, in the last 20 years. What did you expect? But when enough people get personally burned by this, they will react, guaranteed. They will react at some point. It may be late and the response may be very poor, like, you know, the rubber bullets or live bullets, tear gas, water cannons, you know, you name it, getting beat up by a baton, which isn't my favorite thing, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you.
Marcia and then Susan.
Patrick, you just mentioned for all people to be non-compliant and to not be fully engaged in what they want us to do. My initial question before that suggestion was, can you tell us what you're doing on a personal level to counteract this transhumanism agenda? And any other personal and professional tips that you have for individuals that are here on this call?
You bet. What I just said is I won't comply with any of this stuff. I don't care what they ever say about me getting a shot. I will never get a shot. They'll literally have to put me out into a coma or something before I get it. The other thing is I refuse to wear a face mask. I have not worn a face mask one time since this whole thing started. I started from the beginning, so I'm not doing it. I've had plenty of arguments with people along the way, and most of them I've lost. But I don't care. I'm setting a model for myself, and I tell them, I've never worn a face mask. I'm still alive. I've had COVID. I have antibodies. This is not a disease that's going to kill you. And furthermore, a face mask is going to hurt you if you wear it long enough. And I just won't do it. And they just kind of stare at me and, oh, well, weird. But that's my lifestyle at this point. I've given up flying. I don't like that. I used to fly all the time, go places and never had any fear of just flying. I will not fly now, not because I'm afraid of airplanes. I'm just not going to participate with their stupid mask mandates or their vaccine mandates. Now they're bringing out vaccine passports. I won't comply with that either. And, I'll fight them tooth and nail. If I get into argument with somebody, I'll stand my ground until they throw me out, and then I'll go. And if a police officer comes along that says they're going to trespass me, I say, well, you just take me right out in handcuffs, sir, and you trespass me for my position, and we'll settle it. We'll settle it in court. And this has actually happened before. And I'll tell you what, they look at you and they say, no, we're not going to do that. The reason they say we're not going to do that is they know they have no leg to stand on. None. The bottom line is like this: show me the law, show me the statute, and I will obey it. Guidelines are not laws. They're not. They're just guidelines. Suggestions are not laws. Even in Canada, suggestions are not law. But that's what they're saying. They're not. The legislatures are not willing to step up and make this stuff legal. Like actually pass a law that you have to wear a face mask or get vaccinated or whatever. They can't do that. No legislature in the world, I don't think at this point, would stand up and actually do that because they know it's wrong. So the executive branch just takes over and does it. So, well, we're just following the guidelines. Who makes guidelines? Well, it's the World Health Organization. So when are we subservient to the World Health Organization? Well, why do Canadians care about what the World Health Organization said? They're not Canadian. How about we get Canadians to make up what we're going to do here? How about we get a committee of Canadians that talk about Canada as their own people instead of taking marching orders from somebody giving suggestions from the World Health Organization? Anyway, I started in 2018. I started Citizens for Free Speech, a nonprofit organization, and we now have over 33,000 members in the United States. We have a few Canadians too, but they can't do much, unfortunately. But we have about over 33,000 members now. And we're offering training to people to learn how to communicate again and how to get into their civic arena locally and kick up the dust. And this is what has to happen. So you asked me, what am I doing about it? That was my expression of doing something about it. I saw a need for it. Nobody else was doing it. I said, we got to try. Maybe we'll fail, but so what? If we do, we go home and drink some beer. That's the worst that can happen. So far, we're not failing, and people are continuing to come to us in droves because they want to know what to do. They're ready to stand up. They want to know what to do. How can we get going?
Just on the side here, I'm a retired teacher, and I just posted the link from the World Economic Forum of their 300 plus partners. And I just discovered that my pension comes from one of their members, the OTPP, Ontario Teachers Pension Plan.
Ouch.
Oh my God.
Ouch.
I know, big ouch, big ouch. Anyways, thank you for answering that question.
Thanks, Marcia. Susan, and then Bonnie.
Thank you for being here, Patrick. I'm just, what you have to say is just amazing. And I've been aware of a lot of it, but you've added some little nuances to the whole picture. Today, which was really uncanny, my mother died last year at age 100. And she was in the war, and she had a lot of interesting experiences, but she was also very knowledgeable and aware. And I've been going through all her books and came across this one. It's called The New Decalogue of Science by Albert Edward Wiggum,
Yes.
1922.
Yes, I
It
recognize
is
that.
all about what you were talking about. It's about the warnings of science, all of it. And you know, they've got all these different warnings about the medicine, hygiene, and sanitation will weaken the human race.
Yes.
And it has all of those. I mean, it's just a coincidence, but nothing's really a coincidence.
Yeah.
So my question to you, with all this awareness and knowledge and what we have here, and I love the stand that you take against this. And as you say, we are, well, I know that Canadians are more like sheep for the most part. But how do we wake up these people? How do we make them aware of the history when they're so controlled by the propaganda and the agenda that's been thrown at them, and so asleep? How do we wake them up?
Yeah. I'll tell you, the most effective thing that you can do is to call for and have meetups in your local community. And when I say meetup, a meetup could be 3 people. It could be 20 people, it could be 50 people, it doesn't matter. You need to get face-to-face, in person with people and communicate with them and learn how to communicate correctly with them, especially if they don't have your exact worldview, right? If you have some ideas that you're really convinced are right, you need to be able to present those ideas to them without starting a fist fight along the way, because that would break everything up. But you need to be able to share information with people that will move them to a different conclusion in the end. And there's no substitute for meeting face to face with people and communicating face to face. It can even be 2 people, but it has to be intentional. You just don't expect it to happen. I'll give you an example. You go into say you go to a grocery store, and I don't know, you meet somebody that maybe you kind of know, a neighbor, something like, or whatever, and they ask you some question that is like really off the wall. Whoops, where'd your picture go? I was looking at you and you just disappeared. Well, okay. Wherever you went, let me see if I can get back to the other page here. Oh, there you are. Okay, you're down in the lower right-hand side now. You meet up with somebody in the shopping line, and they know where you stand on some of this stuff. And so what could be an argument is brewing. Okay, so they ask you some dumb question. Well, why do you believe that? Blah blah blah. Or can where's your evidence? Of such and such. Instead of answering them or trying to answer them right there on the spot, say, just respond to them like this. For instance, I appreciate your question, and I'm not exactly ready. I can't just kind of answer that on the spot here, but how about we get together for an hour or so next week, next Tuesday, we'll have some tea or some coffee, whatever, and let's discuss that question. That gives you plenty of time to prepare, get your evidence lined up, whatever, so that you can speak to that person. And you're going to take the time to spend an hour or whatever it takes with that person before they throw you out if you disagree. But make it a public place, have a genteel discussion with them and lay out your case. If everybody kind of took this approach, it's going to cost me something. It's going to cost me an hour of my time. It's going to cost me some inconvenience. I would have rather gone out and walked the dog and go talk to this, snowflake. But, this is part of the cost we need to stand up and be willing to pay. It's really not that much, but there are ways to communicate and engage with people that will be non-defensive and actually make them think, wow, she's really, going to put some time into answering this. That's pretty amazing. And you might not be successful, but you might be surprised, because a lot of people get persuaded that way. Does that help?
Thank you. That's helpful. Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Bonnie and then Carol.
Okay, so what I'm wondering is, when I hear this World Economic Forum stuff about we are going to own nothing, how, okay, I'm Canadian. How can, if I have a house that's all paid for, no mortgage, how can they, whoever they are, take away what I own? How can that happen? And is this something that's projected to happen slowly over the next few years? Or is this something that can happen really quickly? And I'm also wondering how what I've heard about this land being taken away to give back to Aboriginal people, is that how that fits in as part of it?
That certainly could be part of it.
What if I
but-
am an Aboriginal person?
right,
I
right.
am an Aboriginal person. What? So then my home on Vancouver Island, can that be taken away from me? You know, anyway, yeah, I'm very curious about this. And several people I've talked to about this said, well, I own my home. Who can take it away? How can they take it away?
It's already been happening over a period of years. It's just like the frog in the pot. You know, the water heats up until he doesn't know it's boiling and he dies. What's happened over the last probably since 1995, at least in Canada and the United States, has been property rights have been chipped away at, chip over all these years. And property rights today don't look anything like they did 25 years ago. What used to be pretty much unrestricted rights on everything, for instance, I don't know, I could say some Aboriginal tribes, American Indian tribes, for instance, might have mining resources on their property. They might have oil, they might have copper, whatever that they, you know, has been their asset, their resource. But in comes the government and Clinton puts a claim on those resources and says, we're going to mine these and you can't do anything about it. Well, that takes away the property from them. It takes away the right to use it for whatever they might want to use it for. Farmers have been always pretty much had restrictive rights and water rights and mineral rights assigned to them when they own property. Today, you can't hardly find a farmer that owns the property or the mineral rights to his land because it was stripped away during a former sale and it went to somebody else. With houses or with farmland where you wanted to, maybe a farmer had a farm and he's thinking, for my retirement, I'm going to develop part of my farm for housing, build some houses, a subdivision or whatever, or sell it off to a property developer and let them build it. Well, you find that farmers have been, their rights to develop their property in a way that they would like to develop it are gone. They can't do that anymore. They have to get 16 different government agencies to sign off on it, which the chances is pretty slim. And they end up just basically landlocked, owning the land, paying the taxes, but they can't do what they want to do with their land. This attack on property rights has been happening for a long time, and it's just been chip along the way. I grew up in Northern California and on a farm right on the Sacramento River, which is one of the main arteries that goes right through the middle of California. We had riparian water rights dating back to like 1870 or something like that in our family, where we had first rights to use that water for our farming operation. Well, over the last 30 years, the farmers in that area have basically lost all their riparian water rights, and they have to stand in line in front of other people now, including all of Southern California, where much of that water is piped off to now. They don't have the same rights that they had before. And it's been a subtle thing, and people fought it along the way and said, oh, well, I guess we lost that battle. But if you get my point, property rights have been under attack for a long time.
Like with farmland, I can understand it, but why would they care about my little lot somewhere?
They shouldn't.
Okay.
I agree they shouldn't. And you individually, they shouldn't. But in America now, we have, in every major city in America, we have real estate brokers. I think they're brokers, but they advertise, if we don't sell your house in 30 days, we'll buy it for the price you're asking. They don't have the money to buy the house. What's happened is Wall Street money and hedge fund money has been, because our Federal Reserve has been printing money like there's no tomorrow, these hedge fund operators are coming in with cash and buying up homes all across America. That's why we have no inventory here in America anymore. They're buying it up and they're renting it back to people. Well, they're not putting those houses back up on the market again to sell them. They just want to rent them.
Right.
So, yeah. So don't sell your house. First thing is, don't ever sell your house.
I won't.
Well, and I guess the other thing I want to add, Bonnie, is in World War II, is we took the homes away and the land from Japanese Canadians, and that was not returned. And I think we're in a war now, and they could make the argument like they made in World War II. Well, these are enemies of the state. So I think we have to look into history and say, have they done this before? And the
Yes.
answer is yes, they have.
So like for those of us who aren't vaccinated, they could say, and your home is gone, that's it.
You're enemies of the state. You're now put into a FEMA camp. We're going to take your asset because, you're not coming out. I mean, I hate to think that that's possible, but let's admit that they've already done that in Canada to the Japanese Canadians.
Yeah, true, absolutely.
They've done it to our First Nations people. So, Rocco has said over and over again, the government is the most dangerous organizations in the world. We
Yes.
need to stop thinking that they're there to protect us. They're, as Patrick said right at the start of this conversation, they're at war with us. They've declared war against us. And during war, rules don't apply.
Yeah, okay,
Bottom
thank
line.
you.
We've only got a couple more minutes with Patrick. So Carol, I don't know if we'll get to the others, but let's, Carol.
Mine is fairly short. We had a occurrence here last week. The COVID van went out to the country, parked on this guy's private property where he had his business. They asked him to leave. COVID van refused. He asked him again. They refused. His son said, "Dad, do you want me to go home and get the gun?" And Dad said, "Yes, please." COVID van left. The gentleman that owned the property phoned the RCMP and said he wanted him charged with trespassing. And he was told that they couldn't because the health orders override the RCMP.
Oh, jeez.
Which is not true, but that's what they're
No, I know it's not true,
Yeah.
but can we watch more of this gentleman's stuff? I mean, I'm finding it very, very interesting. And the other quick thing I have, and I think that everybody has this, we invite them to our house for an hour, but we've been doing this for a year and a half. What evidence do we give them that won't overwhelm them?
Just go ahead and overwhelm
Yeah.
them. Just let them have it.
I mean, you talked about Patrick,
But-
this is a religion. They're under a spell.
Yeah.
And facts don't work.
It doesn't. And you build relationships one at a time, looking people in the eyeball, asking them questions, finding out where they're coming from, so that you can speak to them effectively. But there's a lot of good material out there, I think, on the internet that's still accessible. My whole presentation, for instance, from the Doctors for Disaster Preparedness Convention in Tucson is up on Rumble right now. And you could, or it's on YouTube as well, but you could go listen to that and show that movie, say, hey, they're going to come on over. We're going to look at a video or whatever, put it up on your TV.
Doctors for what?
It's on rumble.com is a video service, and YouTube as well. If
But
you
what
search
is it
on
called?
YouTube for Technocracy News and Trends, just Technocracy News will do it. You'll find my channel,
Okay.
and then you find that video in there. Just, you can just play a video for somebody. It says, take it off of you altogether. Say, I just want your opinion on what this guy says. You play good cop, bad cop. I think this guy's really kind of wacko, but I can't put my finger on it. Can we listen to it together? And you tell me what you're thinking. I'd like to know what you think about it. And just see what they say. They may say, I'm out of here. I'm not coming back. Or they may say, that's really interesting. So,
Patrick, how else can we learn more about what you've learned in your ideas?
well, technocracy.news certainly is my professional site to go to for all things technocracy and now transhumanism. And you can go to citizensforfreespeech.org for our take on free speech and our First Amendment, which we're desperately trying to settle down here. I will say that on our collateral that we have available, we have some brochures and stuff like that. We're not Canada and you're not the United States, but some of our Canadian constituents talked us into allowing for a shipping surcharge to be added to our collateral material so that we can deliver it to Canada. And we have delivered some stuff to Canada. I don't want a slew of it because it takes a lot of extra time to process Canadian orders. But the information is there. There's a lot of stuff. We have a lot of graphics and stuff that are available for free to make posters and stuff for protests. But you need to think that way. We're in a war. We don't want to be in a shooting war. I'll say that right now. You guys don't either. That doesn't end well for anybody. But in the last century, governments killed probably well over 160 million people across the whole century. So we could end up that way, but I don't want to end up that way. A lot of people die. That's ridiculous. So as long as we have our voice and our physical presence where we can talk to people, there's still hope that it will not devolve into a physical war where they come after us with tanks and guns and machine guns and whatever.
And what does give you hope?
Well, number one, I still have hope generally. I still have hope in the American people. We have overcome a lot of things in the past. We've had a lot of catastrophes in our country that were very serious, could have killed us, could have really done us in. We've had a lot of resilience in our country, and I'm not willing to just sit back and say we're done, that it's all over. And I think there's still a lot of Canadians who say that about Canada. Canada has ups and downs, just like we have. It has some good leadership, some bad leadership. Right now it's bad. But, I know personally, I know a lot of Canadians, and I know there's a lot of them that are doggone tough, and they're not going to roll over on this stuff at all. The other thing I have to say, that's my corporate hope, if you will, but I will say way back in 1976, I entered into a relationship with biblical Christianity that has been my hope and anchor ever since. And it still is today. Gives me a lot of personal comfort and a lot of personal energy on to do what I do. Otherwise, I would probably adopt what some people are looking at right now, which is scream and shout and run about. that will not solve anything, I hate to say. But we need to take just a measured approach to this, to stay calm, to be resolute, to be intentional about what we do. We need to know beyond a shadow of a doubt that we have the high moral ground and that we have our facts lined up right. There's no substitute for having facts, even if people won't believe them. If you go into any discussion without defensible facts, you will lose every time, guaranteed. So there's a place for it. You have to always be sure you're on solid ground when you start talking to somebody. And if you don't know something, just say, I really don't know, but I'll go look it up and I'll get back to you on that, okay? And get their phone number and call them back. That's the way we need to do business on this, and we need to do it on a massive scale, not just with the 30,000 members that we have in CFFS. We need to do it massively, like with 1 million members across our country that are all out in the civic arena raising a ruckus to put things back where they belong again.
Patrick, this has been a fabulous conversation, and I'm grateful for your work. It's not easy information to hear. It's alarming to see how persistent has been this move towards scientism and technocracy, and the lack of morality that's in that movement. But we can't address it if we don't recognize it. And so you're critical in helping us to see what we need to see. So thank you.
Exactly right. And I will say, I don't need to say it to you folks, do not take the vaccine. It's not about making you healthy. It's not about giving you antibodies. It's about hacking your body, which they view as an operating system. Your DNA is nothing more than an operating system, these people. And I know the propaganda is in the opposite direction, but it's very, very dangerous at this point to get involved with taking this vaccine. And if you know somebody that has taken it, forgive them, don't bash them, but they need to be aware of what the symptoms might be that they could look for to get some relief if they do have a reaction to the vaccine or to the gene therapy injection. If they do have a reaction, they know how to respond to it, how to get help, and how to maybe shore up that area, whatever's under attack in their body. But otherwise, this is going to be very dangerous for humanity, and a lot of top-notch experts in our country are really sounding the alarm on this gene therapy nonsense. It's just an expression of pure, unadulterated transhumanism that they want to take over the genetic structure of humanity. and I say, well, I won't say what I say. It's not, wouldn't be polite mixed company.
Well, as you said, we're not going to comply.
They're gonna do it. That's right. That's right.
Patrick, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your
Yeah.
wisdom and your courage. If you find value in the kind of conversations that we have here at Vaccine Choice Canada, I invite you to support our work and our mission by becoming a member. Vaccine Choice Canada is Canada's oldest and most trusted vaccine risk awareness authority. A link to join Vaccine Choice Canada will be put into the chat room.